Hello, everybody. Welcome to my inaugural show of the Dancing Negotiator. The first episode is titled Conflict, Fight or Flight, or I should actually say Fight or Growth. I want to thank every one of you for taking the time in your day to come and spend time with me. My goal is that you learn precious gems from each episode that you join me moving forward. So with not much ado, jump right in and join me as we explore this beautiful, beautiful world of conflict. And I do hope you think of it as beautiful. Some people may not think of it as beautiful, but I do hope your perspective might change a little bit. Okay, so let us go right in. So we're going to talk a little bit about my mission. My mission with my episode is this. I would love to empower people to deal with conflict effectively, efficiently, and in a timely manner. And then with every mission, people have a vision. And my vision is this, is that I will be, and we will be, the first negotiators and conflict resolution experts that always incorporate a holistic perspective, keeping in mind the physical, emotional, cultural, social, and spiritual domains of the human being. Remember those domains of the human beings because all of us are part of that. And I would like you to see how that will tie in nicely as we talk about conflict resolution moving forward. What are my goals? My goals are this. I would like each episode to be interactive. I will use analogies that are applicable, incorporate evidence-based frameworks. I will also bring in some research findings and give you tips on my original mnemonics and other experts' mnemonics as well and their frameworks. Values. Do we not all value certain things? In our organizations, we have values. In our families, we have values. Well, I too have values for my show. They are compassion, respect, integrity. Do you not love someone who practices integrity in the workplace or at home? Is that one of the underestimated gems? Integrity is very crucial, as well as humility and love. Our organization, Win-Win Women, is an organization of love. We like to live with love. So, who am I? So I talked a little bit about the holistic perspective of how conflict will be resolved moving forward. I mentioned how we all are holistic beings. So when I like to describe myself, I like to describe myself from a holistic perspective. So basically, I can look at myself from a spiritual sense, whereby first and foremost, I am a child of Yahweh. You're like, Yahweh, what is that? Who is that? Well, research it, okay? And I am also a daughter, a friend, a sister, an aunt. And then relationally, and some of my hobbies, I love to dance, I'm an advocate, I love to interpret dreams. And then professionally, I look at myself as a consultant, a coach, a change agent, and the list goes on. So, before we go into the content of what this 30 minutes will encompass, or part of what it will encompass, I'd like to invite all of you to embark on a journey with me. I'm going to have you embark on two journeys, but the first one is I want to embark on a journey of a story called the Fence Story. Some of you may or may not have heard of it. I'm not sure about that. But if you haven't, here it is. So envision or imagine a setting. The setting was World War II. So apparently this story, as far as I can glean, it is real, but if it's factual, if it's fictional, just go with the message that is being portrayed, both as I tell it and as at the end, okay? And given that most of us just celebrated Veterans Day, I'm sure you can conjure up some images of the World War II or any war, okay? But let's just focus on World War II. So the fence story, the setting is World War II. So some army comrades had a fallen colleague of theirs. So they wanted to bury this individual, and they wanted to bury the individual in a church cemetery. They approached the priest, and the priest was, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, our policies say that only church members can be buried in a church cemetery. Of course, the comrades were disappointed. They were really disappointed because they wanted their comrade who served their country to have a befitting burial. So they left disappointed, but what they did, they went ahead and buried their comrade, but it was outside of the fence boundaries of the church. So they buried their comrade, went their own way. The priest went his own way, but had a hard time sleeping. The whole conversation and event kept playing over and over. And guess what? The next day, the comrades went back to the cemetery to visit their comrades at his burial spot. And they could not find the gravesite. One of them was very baffled and went to the priest and was like, I cannot find my comrade. Someone moved him. And the priest was like, he's still there. They're like, I don't know what you mean. I've checked all over. He's like, he's still there. I moved the fence. So just take a minute or have a minute to just think about that story. Right there, we can see different conflict situations or a conflict situation. What was the conflict? A policy about who can and should and where to be buried in a church cemetery. The priest wanted to adhere to that policy in place, but also because he's human, he's loving, wanted to meet the needs of his comrades. So what did he do? Wisdom and good conflict resolution skills, he moved the fence. And guess what? He moved the boundaries of the fence. The comrades got what they wanted, and the church got what they wanted. They may never know, but he knew, right? So keeping that in mind, this is an example of how when I address conflict and when I teach people and empower them to deal with conflict, I want you to look at things from a holistic perspective. That is like physical, social relationships, emotional, spiritual. What would be ideally a win-win for both parties? I do understand win-wins are not always possible, but when they are, let's come from a place of love, okay? So I talked a little bit about who I am and my professional services. I've given you a little tidbit of how I provide my consultation services in terms of the lenses I look at. But now this slide gives you a deeper picture of my services. So from an administrative services perspective, I provide organizational development, and that is a myriad of things, anywhere from quality improvement, strategic management, risk management, change management, policy and governance materials reviews. And I'm also a personal coach for conflict resolution and for any one of these organizational development activities that you may want. You can find my information right here on my website, Shalom Eagles Wings, or you can email me at cheryl@shalomeagleswings.care. Okay? So now for what you've all been waiting for, more is yet to come. I said I was going to invite you to embark on 2 journeys. The first one was a fence story. Now, all of you, no peeking, close your eyes. Are your eyes closed? Good. Now I want you to imagine this. Before you imagine this, you can still keep your eyes closed. You are probably wondering, why the title, The Dancing Negotiator? Well, that's an excellent, excellent question. I mentioned, or I may not have mentioned it, I love to dance. and I love to resolve conflicts. I love healthy workplaces and yes, healthy families, but my episodes will be dealing primarily with conflict in the workplaces. So going back to the title, The Dancing Negotiator, and my love for dance, and my love for conflict resolution, I would like you to close your eyes, and I'd like to invite you to transport yourself to a grand ballroom. Imagine a couple doing the waltz. You might be like, the waltz, I think I know what that is. Well, the beats usually go like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and on it goes. So keep imagining that dance. The lady in her flowy color dress. Think of your favorite color and imagine she's wearing that color in a flowy garment, okay? So they're dancing, specifically waltzing across that grand, beautiful ballroom. Of course, there's a leader and there has to be a follower. And in a couple, it's usually the man that's the leader and the woman is a follower. She has to pay attention, not to verbal communication, but to the nonverbals. The way his frame is upright. She has to make sure her frame is upright. The gentle tugs and nudges, the pull and the pull enables that graceful gliding motion across the dance floor. Now imagine if she decides, I am gonna take the lead. I hope your eyes are still closed. I hope they're still closed. Now imagine if she decides to take the lead. What happens? He will have no idea what she's doing. They're gonna end up tumbling and tripping over each other. Not a very graceful scene, is it now? So the key to a beautiful dance, a beautiful, graceful, harmonious, aesthetically appealing dance is for each person, dance partner, to recognize their roles and to function in it at the right time and effectively. You may open your eyes. The same is true in the conflict resolution process. You may not necessarily have a leader and a follower. You might, depending on maybe the hierarchy of where you work, but the point is this: each member of the team should know their roles and functions, and each should perform at the right time, effectively, efficiently, for a smooth functioning of the team. When one person tries to do what they're not supposed to do, they're gonna trip on each other's toes. So imagine a scenario in your workplace whereby everything was going smoothly. We were having a lovely time. There was employee satisfaction. You loved waking up, going to work, and then boom, something happened. You dreaded going to work. It was like you're dragging your heels. You got nauseated, just the thought of going to work. Why was that? For some, it could have been they had a new leader in terms of maybe a new manager, director, CEO, whose leadership style was very different, or management style was very different from what you were used to. It could be you had a new employee. Now, this new employee may be doing things very different, maybe dancing to their own tune, so to speak. Or it could be a new work process that was introduced. All of a sudden, you're told, we must do things this way. When you've been doing the same way for 3 years, now all of a sudden, it's like, no, we're going to change this process. So all the scenarios are a recipe for conflict. But the question is it a good type of conflict or bad type of conflict? The title of this episode is Conflict, Fight, or Growth. So let's delve a little bit more about that. When you think about conflict, I would like to invite you to think of a coin. No, I don't want you to think of a coin as in cha-ching, like money, But just think you have a coin in your palm, in the palm of your hand. And just as a coin has a head and a tail. Conflict, I like to liken to a coin that has two sides to it. It's either constructive or destructive. Now, for a constructive kind of conflict, think of it in a nutshell. We're going to go into much more details subsequently and in future episodes, but think of constructive conflict as a process or an outcome that builds up. Either builds up the individual employee, collectively as a team, or the organization, okay? Think of destructive conflict as anything that tears down. So you might have a negative outcome. So let's say maybe in a healthcare setting, it could be medication errors, or worst case scenario, a death. Or it could be employees are dissatisfied with how things are being run. They're not happy with their wages. People are quitting and there's turnover, okay? So just keep those two differentiations in your mind. So conflict in itself, whenever you view yourself or you know someone is experiencing conflict, just take a deep breath. Invite them to take a deep breath and ask them, is this a constructive conflict or a destructive conflict? Of course, the key to both is that you want some sort of resolution, right? And a resolution is always the goal of any kind of conflict. But take that moment, brief second, well, 30 seconds perhaps, and decide, constructive or destructive? And that will help you be in a frame of mind where you could try to tackle the resolution process. We won't be talking about resolution processes in this episode, but we'll be talking about what conflict is and what the different types are. So let's have an activity. So I do hope some of you or all of you have paper and a pen, or if you don't, just do this mentally. So what I'd like you to do, we have 5 scenarios. And I'd like you to classify them based on the definitions you just heard. I'd like you to classify each of these scenarios as constructive conflict or destructive conflict. So if you have the paper and paper, you can write CC for constructive conflict, or DC for destructive conflict. Here we go. Number 1, turnover in a workplace. Is it constructive or destructive? Scenario number 2. Working on a checklist with 5 interdisciplinary team staff. You're like, I don't quite understand that. So let's just say, for example, you have, when I talk about interdisciplinary, so let's say you have a social worker, physiotherapist, dietitian, you name it, 5 different specialties working together to create a checklist. Is this constructive or destructive? I'm not asking for potentials, just the scenario, is it constructive or destructive, okay? Now, the revision of an ambiguous workplace policy. Is it constructive or destructive? Number 4, eliminating waste and enhancing efficiency. You're like, waste, what does that mean? Well, that is actually a term used in organizations to help enhance productivity. Waste in this context, so let's say, for example, you work on the 10th floor, this high-rising building, and you have 5 water fountains on the same floor, in the hallways of the same floor. So that's an example of what someone might call waste, okay? So is that constructive or destructive? Eliminating of waste, okay? And last but not least, we have absenteeism in a healthcare facility. Absenteeism refers to people are being absent for whatever reason. They're calling in sick or they're going on leave of absence. Is this an example of constructive or destructive conflict? So I'll just give you, you've probably all decided already, but I'll just give you about 15 seconds to just go through those scenarios, go over your answers, and then we will delve into their answers shortly and have a little bit more. So I think that 30 seconds is pretty much up. So I'm gradually waiting. Well, here we go. Let's talk about the answers, okay? So number one, turnover in the workplace. So if you get the answers right, pat yourself on the back. If you did not, it's okay. It just shows you that I need to understand and reflect a little bit more on the difference between constructive conflict and destructive conflict. So scenario number one, turnover in the workplace. It is destructive. People having that revolving door of you hiring and then people are always leaving, quitting, just this revolving door ongoing, that's destructive. Because if you think about it, you're going to have to spend lots of money and time to recruit more. Well, number one, interviewing, trying to recruit, orientation, all that takes extra time and costs a lot of money, actually. Okay. So it's not very cost effective for the organization, regardless of what setting or industry you work in. So number two, working on a discharge checklist with 5 interdisciplinary staff. It is constructive. And we're going to go a little bit more about that. And then revision of an ambiguous workplace policy is constructive, because anytime there's ambiguity, that's a potential for conflict, and not just constructive, but destructive to arise. So you want to revise any policies or any guidelines or any instructions you're working on to make sure there's no ambiguity, that when people read the policy, they understand what they're saying, they interpret it correctly and implement appropriately, okay? And last but not least, we have absenteeism in a healthcare facility. So that's definitely destructive. You need to figure out why on earth are people calling in sick? Why are there multiple leave of absence? Is there stress? That's a whole different episode of asking the whys, okay? So working on a discharge checklist with 5 interdisciplinary staff. Let's break that down a little bit more. So let's say, for example, you have a loved one who is being discharged from the hospital back into their homes. And let's say the 5 interdisciplinary staff that you have is the physician, physiotherapist, occupational therapist, social worker, and let's say a dietitian. So that's 5. So the physician, again, keeping in mind that holistic point of view I mentioned, a physician, usually their goal is usually about making sure the individual does not have a relapse of what admitted them into the hospital, as an example, making sure that that individual is taking their medications appropriately, as an example. So for that checklist, their focus, the physician's focus could be, I want to make sure there's a portion in that checklist that addresses making sure they're taking care of their bodies so they don't have a relapse and be admitted in the hospital, and making sure there's an area for medication reviews that someone makes sure that patient is taking the right medications at the right time, dose, and so forth, okay? Now, the physiotherapist could be more like, you know what? My focus is I don't want that individual to fall at home. I want to make sure that individual patient is doing their home exercises. And they have a prescription. When I say prescription, they have directions, visuals for how to do their home exercises. So they're going to be like, I want a portion on that checklist to address that. Social worker could be more like, you know, I'm more concerned that this individual has resources in the community to make sure they're connected, to make sure they have network, to make sure they're not isolated, right? Make sure we have a spot on the checklist for that. Occupational therapist might be like, I'm concerned that this individual may have safety concerns at home. I want to make sure they can climb in and out of a bathtub appropriately. I want to make sure they can cook safely with the equipment. They're not going to have the house catch fire, as an example. And then last but not least, dietitian will be like, yeah, that's all nice and good, everybody. I appreciate what you're saying, but my focus is I want to make sure they're eating healthy, and not just healthy as in, well, eating good, nutritious food. I don't want them to eat junk. I don't want them to eat whatever because they don't have the right funds to purchase foods. So you, social worker, I'm so glad you're here. Please make sure she or he has the right funds and referrals to the food bank if they need to. So all of them have a focus from different lenses of how to take care of this individual. The end outcome is holistic care, healthy individuals, safe in all of those dimensions. That's an outcome, right? So definitely working on a discharge checklist with 5 interdisciplinary staff. Yes, it has a potential to cause conflict, but the kind of conflict is constructive conflict. So yeah, so I hope that helps explain where I was coming from there. So I hope you have gleaned some gems from this little discussion we've had so far. My next show, our next episode, I should say, just a reminder, will be in 2 weeks' time. Why? Because we are honoring the American Thanksgiving. So there is not going to be any episodes next Friday at the same time. But on December 3rd, I welcome you back, same time, same place. And here's a little tidbit of what we're going to be talking about. Have you all heard of the movie The Sound of Music with Julie Andrews? If not, I highly recommend it. It's such a wholesome movie. But why do I bring it up? I'm not a very good singer. I harmonize much better than I sing, but see if you can detect this tune. Let's start from the very beginning. Da, 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 da. When you read, you begin with A, B, C. When you sing, you begin with do, re, mi, right? So with conflict resolution, you have to start at the very beginning. So I invite you to come back for the next episode, and we'll start at the very beginning, which is basically an original mnemonic that I created that is supported with evidence-based practice and frameworks. So that's what the next episode will be, the A of assessing of how to deal with conflict. And I will provide additional frameworks, a tool for you to assess conflict, okay? So once again, you can reach me at Cheryl@ShalomEaglesWings.kia via email. You have my website here, which is www.shalomeagleswings.kia. And I would like to announce the launching of my book. So this book is actually a revision it was originally published in 2011, but you can imagine 10 years, things change, right? So a little bit of a history. I have been a healthcare provider for 18 years, different in sectors of healthcare, majority of the time 10 years in the operating room, then community and so forth. So this book was from when I was in the operating room, but here I have a book launch. If you're interested, contact me. I can have special discounts. It will be good gifts for family members. But before we end today, I want to leave you with a very important thought. Please remember this every single time you wake up and you're experiencing a conflict situation. You are needed in this world to be a solution. Be the best that you can, and do not rob the world of a precious gem, you. And with that, I thank you very much for participating, attending, and until next time, goodbye.